Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
When we talk about increasing productivity, what does that actually mean? Does that mean the number on the graph of whatever it is that we're measuring went up? Well, sure it does. But when we talk about increasing productivity in a positive sense, it normally has to meet three basic conditions. The first is we're getting more done in the same or less time. The second thing is our product quality is staying the same, it's uniform or actually improving. And the third thing is that while we're doing all of this, our costs are not going parabolic. They're not going completely out of control. For example, if let's say you produce or collect $80,000 a month and you're netting 25% or $20,000 a month in your practice. If you were to raise your collections from 80 to 160, you've doubled, and you still netted only $20,000 a month, that would not be a satisfactory increase in productivity. Why? Because your costs went completely out of control. Or let's say you're working 38 hours a week to collect this $80,000 a month. And then I say to you, well, doc, why don't you just double the amount of hours you're working? You should open on Saturdays and evenings and maybe a little bit on Sundays. So now you're working 76 hours a week and your collections go up to 160 a month. Well, again, now you're working an 80-hour week. You're working 14-hour days. If you're working 5 days a week, that is not a satisfactory increase in productivity. Our hours went completely out of control. And if you're running an 80-hour week practice, your costs are already also going up as well because you're having to have staff work longer hours. So there are specific ways to increase productivity, but you usually have those three basic conditions that go along with it in order for that production increase to be satisfactory. Now, I should clarify something as we go through this episode that I keep saying increasing production, increasing productivity. In dentistry, we refer to production, the statistic of production, normally as a start, a new charge. We prep some crowns, that's production for today. If it's $1,200 a crown and we did 4, that's $4,800 in production. And sure, that's the name of that statistic. But when I'm saying increasing production or productivity, I'm not just talking about that. Every specific job has certain things expected of it, which we could say is its production. A financial coordinator collects money. That's the production of the financial coordinator. So when I say production or increasing productivity, I'm not just limiting myself to the dental sense of the word production with relation to charges. I just wanted to throw that out there. So there are many ways to increase productivity in a business, from organizational systems to increasing efficiency to training the team. And there's all kinds of things you can do. But there is one fundamental lesson that you should go over with every new employee when you put them on a job if you want to ensure that they are production oriented. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And if we unpack this concept of productivity a little bit, increasing productivity even further, what does that indicate? If we have somebody, say a treatment coordinator, we want to increase their productivity. We're essentially asking them to create or obtain more of what we consider to be a product. Okay? That's essentially what we're asking. Whatever their product is, which is what I want to talk about here, we're asking them to get more of that in the same amount of time that they are working. So then the real question is, does your team know what their exact product is? And I'm going to tell you that for 90% of the people listening to this episode, they probably don't. And if you want to do a little survey, you can do a little survey that you can go over what I cover in this episode with them and then do it again afterwards. You'll find that the answer is different, but do a little survey. Go up to any of your team members and ask them, what is the product of your job, or what are the products of your job? For example, you go to your receptionist and you say, what is your product? Well, I answer the phones. That's what you're going to hear. Or you ask your dental assistant, well, I help the doctor. These are their products. Okay. And you're going to see as I go through this, that actually isn't a product. So how can you expect somebody to be production oriented when they don't know what their product is? So What is a product by definition with relation to organization? Well, that's what I want to get into next. As you know, if you're familiar with MGE, we use the Hubbard Management System developed by L. Ron Hubbard. If you're not familiar with the Hubbard Management System, I'll put a link to MGE's webpage on the Hubbard Management System on the episode webpage here. But Mr. Hubbard developed the Hubbard Management System over the course of a little more than 30 years. It consists of millions of words, millions. And it covers just about any aspect of organization that you could conceive of, from financial planning to strategic planning to HR to hiring to pretty much anything you could conceive of, sales. I could go on. But it's very, very expansive. So again, I'll put that link on the episode webpage if you want to know more. But let's take a look here at how Mr. Hubbard defines a product. So there's two definitions of it. I'm going to go over each. So let's look at the first one. A product. A product is a completed thing that has exchange value, a completed thing that has exchange value within or outside the activity. A completed thing that has exchange value within or outside the activity. So right now I'm recording on a mic made by AKG. AKG makes this microphone. So that microphone was made by AKG. It was a completed thing. It had exchange value. What does exchange value mean? Someone was willing to give something for that microphone that had value itself. Because what is exchange? You're giving something of value in exchange for something of value. You do a crown for a patient and they pay you $1,100 or $1,300. They give you money. So that's exchange. All right. So this mic was made by AKG. It had exchange value. We paid for this mic. I don't know what we paid. And we received a microphone. And that was outside of their activity, their organization, AKG. I bought it. All right. That's one definition of a product. But that's a thing. But now there's a second definition. A product, this is definition 2. A product is a finished, high-quality service or article in the hands of the being or group it serves as an exchange for a valuable. That's a product. Let's unpack this a little bit as Mr. Hubbard explains it. So he says a product is a finished, high-quality service or article. This could be a service, a la crown, a cleaning, etc., or article, this AKG mic, in the hands of the being or group it serves. So it actually has to be in the hands of the person who's going to use it as an exchange for a valuable. That's a product. So now, I don't know if you remember, during when there was all the supply chain issues at the height of the pandemic, this is probably back in about 2020, 2021, maybe even into early 22, there were chip shortages. So you had cars manufactured by various car manufacturers just sitting in lots with no chips. So for all intents and purposes, the car was finished. Everything was in the car. They just didn't have the chips in the cars. The cars were not sellable. They're just sitting in a lot. So by definition, that would not have been a product. Why? Because a product is a finished, high-quality service or article in the hands of the being or group it serves. Well, they couldn't sell them. No one had them. They weren't products. They were sitting on a lot. Okay? What if they, and they weren't finished. They weren't finished in high quality. What if I come into your office for emergency treatment and you do molar endo on me, a root canal, and it's $1,000. You charge me $1,000. I pay you nothing. I tell you I forgot my wallet and I leave. You did the root canal. You filled the root canal. Maybe even built it up. So is that a product? No, it's not. Why not? A finished, and obviously it's not done. The crown's not done yet, but track with this here. A finished high-quality service, that's a service in this case, or article, in the hands of the being and group it serves. You did it in my mouth. It was in my hands, or really technically in my mouth, as an exchange for a valuable. I didn't pay you. Therefore, it was not a product. You see? So let's read this definition again, because this definition, most powerful things are extraordinarily simple. This is simple and super powerful. So let's read this again, and I want you to think with this with relation to organization. A product is a finished, high-quality service or article in the hands of the being or group it serves as an exchange for a valuable. That's a product. And I'll put this as a downloadable if you want on the episode webpage. You can download this quote from Mr. Hubbard. So it has to be finished. It has to be high quality. It has to be in the hands of the being or group it serves as an exchange for a valuable. And you can exchange a product internally and externally. So let's look at that for a second. You hire a scheduling coordinator. So what is it you're expecting your schedule coordinator to produce? What is it that you want? Why do you have a schedule coordinator? You have it so that your schedule is full. It's scheduled the way that you want it. It's done according to whatever your schedule policy is. If you have primary time in the morning, that's scheduled there. It's scheduled for the right procedures at the right time. It's scheduled so that you're not working through lunch until 8 o'clock at night. It's scheduled properly, and it's productive. That's what you're expecting from this schedule coordinator. So if this schedule coordinator does that, they give that to you. Here, doc, here's a productive schedule. And what do you give them in exchange? They're part of your team, and you give them a paycheck. Now, the problem is most people today are not production-oriented. They're hours-oriented. Well, doc, I worked 8 hours today. Let's say you had me as your, reactivation or your hygiene coordinator. So I'm your hygiene coordinator. Hygiene has 2 to 3 openings a day. I was there 8 hours a day. I made lots of phone calls and nobody scheduled. So you're paying me for the 8 hours that I was there because you're legally obligated to, but I'm not giving you what I'm supposed to produce from my job, which is a full hygiene schedule. People actually in the office seeing the hygienist. It's a bit of a weird think that develops. And I would recommend, because I view it this way, if you go to the supermarket and you buy food, let's say you buy your lettuce and your food and whatever, and you throw it on the little belt to pay for it, and then you notice you bought some iceberg lettuce, you notice the bottom is brown and wet. It's rotting. Does the cashier tell you, oh, well, you put that on the belt, you have to pay for it? No, I'm not paying for that. You put it back. Let me get a head of lettuce that isn't gross or rotten. You wouldn't pay for that because it's no good. Well, why would you continue to pay for somebody who's not delivering the goods that you're paying them for? Now, from some employees' perspective, they may think that you're paying them for their mere presence. No, you're paying them for a product, but in a lot of cases, they don't know what their product is. Because again, a product is a completed service, a finished high-quality service or article in the hands of the being or group it serves. Same thing. What is the treatment coordinator's product? I'm your treatment coordinator. You send me off to go do financial arrangements for a patient. Why are you paying me? Why am I there? I'm supposed to deliver a patient who's paid for and scheduled for their treatment so that they come in and they actually start their treatment. That's my product. As a doctor, if you own your practice, you have 3 different jobs. You're an executive because you own a practice. You're a doctor. And you're a salesperson. Each of those different jobs have a different expectation or product associated with them. If you're a salesperson, what would you expect from a salesperson? People who are closed and started on service. So if you're not closing anybody, you're not getting your product. What would you expect from a doctor? If you had an associate doctor and you gave them procedures to do, they would execute them at a high level of quality and you have healthier patients. What would be the product of an executive? A flourishing, profitable organization. So if you're there and you go, wow, my organization is not flourishing and profitable, well, maybe you're not really getting the product you're supposed to get as an executive. Do you see? So if someone doesn't know what their product is, they're going to have trouble. Now, what are some specific examples of a product using this definition that we just covered from Mr. Hubbard? Well, let's look. Let's say you have a receptionist. Might be a properly routed phone call. Maybe they don't just answer the phone. It's a phone call that was routed to the proper place. You starting to think with this a little bit? How about a scheduling coordinator? Maybe it would be, there would be individual products that they get, maybe the overall product of their job. It would be a patient who shows up on time for their appointment for the correct amount of time. Do you see? That might be one of their products. One of the other products they might give you is a productive, efficient schedule. How about a financial coordinator? All funds collected for services rendered. That might be a product. And you could do this anywhere. How about a cook? A meal that tastes good and is worth paying for. That's prepared in a timely manner. You could take a look at this, but you realize the product is the outcome. What kind of helps you think with this, there's a little bit more to this from Mr. Hubbard that I want to cover with you. And it gives you sort of the nature of a product. And it applies to any job. And it's what Mr. Hubbard called the conditions of existence. Again, I'm going to read you these quotes and I'll put them as a download on the episode webpage. But if you understand these 3 conditions of existence, and I'll kind of circle back to how this relates to a product, but you'll understand the nature of a product and you'll be able to think with it as well as figure out what the product of any job in your office is. So let me read this to you. So here's what he says. There are three conditions of existence. These three conditions comprise life. Comprise means to make up or constitute. They are be, do, and have. So again, there are three conditions of existence. These three conditions comprise life. They are be, do, and have. Now what's be? It says the first condition of existence is being. Being is defined as the assumption, choosing, of a category of identity. It could be said to be the role in a game. An example of beingness could be one's own name. Another example would be one's profession. All right, so we have the assumption of a category of identity. So it's a beingness, right? Let's say I'm a baker. I have the beingness of a baker. Okay. If you're playing baseball, you're the second baseman. That's your beingness in a baseball game. It's the identity in whatever game or activity you're playing. He goes a little bit further. Another example would be one's physical characteristics. Each one of all of these things could be called one's beingness. Beingness is assumed by oneself or given to oneself or is attained. For example, in the playing of a game, each player has their own beingness. So you get this concept of beingness. You know, whether you're in a game, a sport, whether you're in an office, you have the schedule coordinator, the assistant, the doctor. There's a certain beingness to doctor. If you walked into an operatory dressed up like a clown, I guess that could work in a pediatric office, but that would not go over well. The patient would go, that's not part of the beingness of a doctor. An executive has a certain beingness. You know, if you've seen probably good and bad executives. There's nothing wrong with being, upbeat and in good communication with your team. But if you're spending time goofing around with the team, playing practical jokes and, acting like just one of the group as opposed to being the executive, that's not part of the executive beingness. Are you getting the flavor of this? All right. So let's look at this next point, doingness. So here's what Mr. Hubbard says. The second condition is doing. By doing is meant action, function, accomplishment, the attainment of goals, the fulfilling of purpose. All right, so I'm a baker. That's my beingness. And what do? I bake. Easy enough, right? You're a dentist. You do dentistry. I'm a scheduler. I schedule people. That's my doingness. I'm a receptionist. I answer the phones. Being, doing. Now, you could qualify this a little bit. Because it's not just you say, okay, you're the receptionist. Well, what's part of the receptionist's beingness? You would want somebody who's smiling, someone who's happy, someone who's cheerful, someone who's welcoming. If I call your office and the person answering the phone sounds like they're in pain and they've been stapled to their chair, I've had those before. You call and, it's a great day at ABC Dental. I'm, stapled to my desk. That's not part of the correct beingness because as a prospective patient, I'm going to hear this and go, I don't want to go to this office. I mentioned here in our seminars, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the podcast, that I've been in close to 1,000 different dental practices in the United States, applying the stuff that we teach on the MGE program. And I've gone into some offices and, you have this little window that's maybe 8 by 8 and it opens and the person behind the window looks, what do you want? It's just the wrong beingness. It doesn't fit. It's not a welcoming office where people want to get a lot of new patients, this friendly, comfortable environment where I'm going to feel nice. And, maybe I'm a little bit nervous about going to the dentist. That doesn't make it any better for me. That is the wrong beingness. But now beingness has a lot to do with doingness. Let's say I'm a baker. And I'm not a very ethical baker. I use junky ingredients. I don't care. The flour I buy the flour that's, the knockoff, I don't know what you would call it, when you have dented cans. But I buy flour that's almost rotten because it's cheaper and I don't care. And if people get sick, I don't care. And, it's dirty and there's bugs everywhere and I just don't care. I don't have a hygienic bakery. The health department would shut me down at any second, right? Well, if I'm an ethical baker, that's my beingness. That's the type of stuff I'm going to do. Your beingness relates to your doingness. You could look at this as a doctor. Let's say you go, okay, my whole purpose is to get patients healthy. That's what I'm here for. And that's all I care about. Well, then if the way you operate at that point is I'm just going to do what insurance covers. I just want to do what insurance covers. So you see a patient, they have active disease, they need a lot of work, but their insurance is only going to pay X amount, so that's all you're going to do. Well, that wouldn't match your beingness, would it? You want to do what's best for your patients. You want to get them healthy, but you're only doing what insurance covers. Doesn't work. If you're a doctor and you're there to get them healthy, who cares what insurance pays? You're there to get them healthy. Let's figure it out. So your beingness and doingness are closely related. But we had be, do, and have. So what's have? Let's have a look at this. Mr. Hubbard says the third condition of existence is havingness. By havingness, we mean owning, possessing, being capable of commanding. The game of life demands that one assumes a beingness in order to accomplish a doingness in the direction of a havingness. All right, so havingness is owning, possessing, being capable of commanding. That's havingness. But now, if we look at this relation to our baker example, we have a baker. That's the beingness. What do? They bake. What's the havingness this baker creates? A cake, a loaf of bread, a donut. Hope you're not hungry, right? I'm going on with this. I am a little bit. But you see, so baker bakes cake. The havingness is the end result. The havingness is in the end result. So if we go back to that definition of a product I went over a few minutes ago, I'm going to read that again, and you tell me whether a product is a be, a do, or a have. I'll read it. Product is a completed thing that has exchange value within or outside the activity. That's the first definition. Second definition, a product is a finished, high-quality service or article in the hands of the being or group it serves as an exchange for a valuable. That's a product. So is a product a be, a do, or a have? Well, if you guessed a have, you guessed correctly. It's something that is created. It's brought into existence, not something that one does. Earlier in the episode, I mentioned surveying your team for their product. What's your product? And I told you the type of answers you probably got if you did this. You ask your receptionist, what's your product? Well, I answer the phones. Or your assistant, what's your product? I help the doctor. Is that a be, a do, or a have? That's a do. And it's funny, if you look at most job interviews, look how they work. Normally, when you're doing a personnel interview, you sit down with somebody and you look at their resume and you look at the different jobs they had. That's their beingness, right? I was the receptionist. I was the sales manager. I was the this. I was the that. These are all be. And then what do you ask them? So what did you do when you were the sales manager at, so-and-so company? Well, I did this. I did that. I did this. I did that. It's all do, 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 do. I have somebody who's very successful in the HR industry, and he refers to these as doobie-doo interviews. Because it's, what was your job? What did you do? What was your job? What did you do? Okay? There's never an association with what did you produce at that job? I could talk to anybody and figure out whether because when you're hiring a personnel, what are you interested in? You're interested in somebody who is productive. Maybe they haven't ever been in the dental industry before, but they've shown a capability to produce something. Someone who is productive, because at one point in time, everybody had no dental experience at one point in time, including you if you're a doctor. So, but if you're capable of producing something, you can be trained to produce something in the dental industry. But you look at, again, how most of these job interviews go. They don't focus on production. So if I'm interviewing somebody, let's say they were a salesperson or a sales clerk at a department store, it would be, all right, great. So what was your job? Good. And what were your duties? Great. Okay, so did you guys measure your productivity at all? Now, I might get a couple different answers. One, no, I never paid attention to that. Well, that's a big X for me. If someone isn't production-oriented, I'm just not interested. If they go, yes, as a matter of fact, I did. We weren't paid commission, but they did measure how much we sold in a given week. Then I could ask them, well, what did you sell in an average week? Well, I sold about $7,000 to $10,000 of merchandise. Well, how did that rank amongst the other salespeople? I was about 2 or 3 pretty consistently out of 10 salespeople. Now I'm finding out what the person can produce. You see? Because if they have zero attention or interest in what they've produced or whatever, it's just not on their radar at all, then that's probably not the person for me. I want somebody who's interested in producing outcomes. But similarly, if I'm hiring a new person, one of the first things I'm going to show them is what products are expected from them on this job. So if you hire a scheduler, what's the product you want from a scheduler? So you'd say, well, your statistic is going to be production, and I'll mention a little bit more on that in a second. So here's the product I expect from you. I expect a productive schedule. I don't want a lot of openings. I want it done in accordance with our scheduling policy. I want patients to show up on time. I want to be able to have lunch, and I want to get out of here on time. And I want the production to grow month in and month out, at least on a steady basis. Those are marching orders. So then the person then has to figure out how to create that. That's called training. And then here's the beauty of it. If you give somebody, you tell them, look, this is your product. Well, guess what? A statistic measures a product. Because let's look at something for a second. Do you care if, let's say I was your scheduler and I worked 8 hours a day, and you had a super hyper productive schedule. And I said to you, Doc, and I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't do this, but I'm giving you an example. Doc, listen, I'm taking this class. I'm going to have to leave an hour early, 3 days a week. But I promise you I'll keep the production at the same level. And I do that, and you don't pay me for the hour early that I leave, and the production stays at the same level. Do you really care that much? No, because they're giving you what you wanted from that job. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do that, but I'm trying to give you the concept here. Really what you want is production, and you want them oriented towards production, and then you use a statistic to measure that production. And then ideally, everybody understands how their product that they create contributes to the other products in the office. Like I understand as a scheduler that if I get people in when they're supposed to be in for the right amount of time at the right time, that allows you, the doctor, to do what you're supposed to do, which contributes to the overall product of the office, which might be a happy, healthy patient who refers other patients to the practice. So there's a product of the practice, there's products of every individual job, and that's something that you would want to cover very early on with a new employee. Otherwise, they're just going to be focused on what should I do? It's really not what should you do, it's what should you produce. And you know what's kind of funny? In this article where Mr. Hubbard introduces this concept of being, doing, and having, he talks about kids. Because you look at a lot of kids, what is it you do when you're 5 years old? What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, fireman, astronaut, whatever it is that you chose to be. Maybe at 5 you pick it, maybe you don't. But really, what ends up happening is it doesn't always work out the way the person hoped that it would. You know, a person says, well, I want to be a fireman. Okay, great. And I want a Ferrari. Well, you're probably not going to get a Ferrari and a fireman salary. That's probably just not going to work out unless you win the lottery. So here's what Mr. Hubbard says about this. This is just something I throw out there because I found it really interesting. You might like it. He says this with children. He says, if we asked children, what do you want to produce in life? We could probably get a workable answer. From that, they could figure out what they'd have to do to produce that. And from that, they could know what they had to be. Then with a little cooperation, they would be able to lead a happy and valuable life. Concentrating on be, one finds them ready to be all right, but then they stand around the next 50 years waiting for their havingness to fall out of the sky. Just an interesting point. I did that with my kids early on. What do you want to produce in life? What do you want to have? So focusing on the end product, the final outcome, the objective, the product is critical on any job because then it's very clear to a person what it is that you were expecting them to give you as a part of that job. Anyway, I hope that helps. I put those quotes for you if you want to download them on the episode webpage, if you want to refer back to them. I do recommend you try that exercise out before you go over the definition of a product with your team. Ask them what their product is, cover the definition, and then ask them what their product is. It'll get them a heck of a lot more oriented to being more productive, and it'll actually make their job a lot more fulfilling. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you this week. If you have any questions about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Listen, have a great week, and we'll see you at the next episode.